Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Zhao Long's eyes went wide, and Lu Li gaped in shock. Everyone else had similar expressions on their faces as they looked at Bai Xiaochun standing there, laughing crazily. Aphrodisiac pill? Bai Lin said, mouth agape. Before anyone could ask any more questions, Bai Xiaochun waved his sleeve, sweeping up all 8 pill furnaces as he used the power of his undying tendons in his legs to leap into the air toward the Great Wall. All right, big-bellied beasts, he said, his eyes shining brightly as he sailed through the air. Bai Xiaochun is coming for you. As for Bai Lin, his eyes flickered as he suppressed his confusion and took a step to follow Bai Xiaochun. As for Zhao Long and the others, after a moment of hesitation, they also flew into motion toward the Great Wall, filled with curiosity about the medicinal pills Bai Xiaochun had created in such a terrifying state. It didn't take long for Bai Xiaochun to be atop the Great Wall itself, where he let out a shout and threw all of the pill furnaces out toward the battlefield. Down below, the giants of the savage tribes, as well as the seemingly endless sea of souls, were in the middle of a charge toward the wall. Now that the pill furnace's power had been negated, the vengeful souls were under less pressure, and were easier to control. As a result, the necromancers had power to spare, which they used to upgrade some of the vengeful souls, making them much more powerful than before. More booms rang out on the battlefield than ever before. The increased power of the vengeful souls ensured that less savages were falling in battle, and at the same time, the pressure on the 5 legions had increased. As for the 8 pill furnaces that had just been tossed out, they were crimson from heat, and were a shocking sight to behold. The mere thought of what would happen if they exploded was terrifying to contemplate. In fact, as soon as they appeared, the savage giants felt anxiety rising up in their hearts. However, they didn't panic. As they stared at the incoming furnaces, the black-robed old man on the black altar some distance away, as well as the necromancers and tribal chiefs by his side, were all watching the scene play out on a screen of water. Scraping the bottom of the barrel, huh? The black-robed old man said coolly. That move won't work anymore. Expression cold, he performed a right-handed incantation gesture and then waved his finger at the water screen. The screen rippled, after which a dozen or so spheroid beasts on the battlefield suddenly raised their heads and bellowed. Then, looks of disdain appeared on their faces as they opened their mouths wide and inhaled deeply. Instantly, the 8 pill furnaces wobbled back and forth, and then shot toward the spheroid beasts, who began to fight amongst each other to consume them. Within moments, all of the pill furnaces had been swallowed down. As for the beasts who hadn't managed to swallow any furnaces, they began to howl in discontent. When the old man on the black altar saw the scene playing out, he smiled faintly, a look of scorn in his eyes. This was the second time that the cultivators of the 5 legions had witnessed pill furnaces being consumed. Bai Lin stood there quietly, while the other cultivators let out light sighs. Bai Xiaochun was the only one who simply stood there, looking coldly at the 8 beasts who had swallowed the pill furnaces. Eat up, he murmured, and don't spill a drop. A muffled thump rang out, and the huge beasts' bellies expanded for a moment before shrinking back down to normal. The beasts then looked threateningly toward the Great Wall and let out menacing howls before turning, as if to leave. Simultaneously, a large number of savage giants flew over to protect them. Meanwhile, the other savage giants on the battlefield began to call out in taunting fashion. That's all you've got? Those magical items are useless against us now. Those wimps on the Great Wall are still trying this gimmick? 8 pill furnaces aren't even enough to get our beasts full. How moronic can you get? Their pill furnace trick didn't work last time, and yet they tried the same thing again. When the cultivators of the 5 legions heard the laughter ringing out from the battlefield, they gritted their teeth in frustration. Were it not for orders passed down by the diva to hold their position on the wall, they would definitely have poured out in deadly fashion and filled the battlefield with rivers of wildlander blood. Bai Lin sighed, and turned to Bai Xiaochun as if to say something. Before he could, Bai Xiaochun's eyes narrowed, and he murmured, any moment now, and their laughter will cease. When I get pissed off, I frighten even myself. When Bai Lin heard that, he was taken aback. And then, before he could ask any questions, the 8 beasts who had consumed the pill furnaces suddenly stopped moving. A moment later, their expressions flickered, and slowly, their eyes began to turn bright red. They began shivering, and even opened their mouths to burp out pink smoke. In fact, their entire bodies suddenly seemed to be glowing red. Hoarse pants could be heard, which soon turned into clamoring howls. As the surrounding savage giants looked on in shock, the 8 beasts suddenly turned on them and pounced in full madness. 2 of the beasts even turned on their own kind with maddened howls. It took only a moment before all 8 of the beasts were pouncing on anything nearby that moved. All of them were under the complete control of the aphrodisiac pill. Furthermore, because the aphrodisiac pills had exploded inside of the beasts, the energy released was impossible to dispel. It was difficult to put into words the incredible power contained in pills like that, pills which had been refined 4 times. Whether the beasts were male or female didn't matter. As long as the pill furnaces had exploded in their stomachs, they were bereft of all sense of reason, and became lost within the effects of the aphrodisiac pill. If that were all there were to the situation, it might not have been a big deal. However, they continuously belched out pink smoke, smoke that didn't affect the vengeful souls, but most definitely affected the savage giants. All the giants had to do was get a whiff of that smoke, and their faces would instantly flush. A moment later, their eyes would turn both blank and bloodshot at the same time, and they would throw their heads back and roar. In the briefest of moments, the entire battlefield was thrown into complete and utter chaos. Screams and shrieks rang out in all directions. As of this moment, the area outside the Great Wall didn't look like a battlefield at all, but rather, a scene of absolute pandemonium. One of the main reasons why these aphrodisiac pills were so terrifyingly effective was that Bai Xiaochun had combined his original formula with his fantasy pill formula. He had even performed spirit enhancements on some of the main ingredients. Thus, the pills were far more shocking than they had ever been before. The cultivators on the Great Wall looked down, their minds spinning, looks of blank shock on their faces, their hearts battered by waves of astonishment because of what they were witnessing. Damn it, what exactly is going on? What medicinal pills were they? Heavens, everyone from the 5 legions was talking about what was happening, whether they were ordinary soldiers, lieutenants, captains, and even the colonels and major generals. Without exception, the shocking scene playing out caused them all to lose their cool. Even Bai Lin, a general of the 5 legions, felt his mind spinning in astonishment. In fact, the indescribable scene playing out was so shocking that the huge eye on top of the pagoda flickered. Then, 3-eyed Chen Hachan appeared. He was a respected diva, and yet even he couldn't help but gasp, and then look over at Bai Xiaochun with a very strange expression on his face. Is this really the Great Wall? He thought. In fact, everyone was similarly stunned. As of this moment, the name of the pill's creator, Bai Xiaochun, was being indelibly branded into the minds of everyone present. For the rest of my life, I must make sure to never, ever provoke the terrifying Bai Xiaochun. As countless gasps rang out, and the chaos on the battlefield continued to play out, the black-robed old man on the black altar, as well as the surrounding necromancers and tribal chiefs, were all watching what was happening. Deathly silence prevailed on the altar, as all eyes were completely glued to the water screen. No one was talking, and in fact, none of them were even breathing. It took a long moment before any breathing to occur, but when it did, it soon turned into panting, and eventually the entire group was physically shaking. Then, cries of rage began to ring out from the altar. Bai Xiaochun, the wild lands will destroy you or die in the attempt. Heaven damned Bai Xiaochun, why you? You will not die a good death. Issue a death warrant. Tell the whole world that this Bai Xiaochun must die. If he doesn't die, the wild lands will live in disgrace for all time. Bai Xiaochun looked out at the chaos on the battlefield and cleared his throat. Then he stuck his chin up and flicked his sleeve. With the snap of a finger, Bai Xiaochun gave all savages and beasts no other choice than to be reduced to ashes. Looking like the picture of a lonely hero, he turned and strolled dramatically off the Great Wall. As he did, the cultivators behind him watched him leave, shock and other mixed emotions clearly visible on their faces. Some of those expressions were those of reverence, some were fear, and others were plain terror. As Bai Xiaochun left, the magical cannons on the Great Wall rumbled to life. How could the 5 legions not take advantage of this spectacular opportunity? Some of the cultivators even charged onto the battlefield itself, where every enemy in their path was crushed like twigs. Bai Xiaochun didn't need to know the final outcome of the battle. He was content knowing that his message had been clearly sent to the wildlands, provoke Bai Xiaochun, and pay the price. The aphrodisiac pill was not without fault. For example, although it worked quite well on beasts, if the savage giants wished to protect themselves from its effects, they could do so in many ways. The only reason it had worked so effectively in this situation was because of the element of surprise. And of course, Bai Xiaochun was well aware of that. However, he didn't plan to use the aphrodisiac pill as a way to accumulate battle credit. He simply wanted to use it to frighten the wildlands, and ensure that they didn't dare to send beasts to consume his exploding furnaces. Well, exploding furnaces can't be a long-term tactic anyway. I need to switch things up a bit, and the key to that is my soul convergence pill. As Bai Xiaochun left, Zhao Long and the others followed him, their hearts trembling, the mere sight of Bai Xiaochun's back causing their hair to stand on end. When it came to thoughts of Bai Xiaochun's terrifying aphrodisiac pill, both Zhao Long and Lu Li felt the same. Not only were they scared to death, but they also couldn't help but muse that he was truly born for battle. In the following few days, word spread to all of the cultivators in Great Wall City. Stories abounded about what had occurred when Bai Xiaochun made his move, and yet again, his name shook the entire city. Not only were his pill-concocting techniques fear-inspiring, but his medicinal pills were horrific. Most of the grandmasters who lived near him in the armory were so scared that they moved away. By that point, the armory was almost half empty, and when Bai Xiaochun realized that, he simply waved his sleeve and had the empty half consolidated into his own personal headquarters. Of course, because of his actions, he earned a huge amount of battle credit, which immediately got him promoted from lieutenant to captain. Because of that, despite his residence being much larger than before, the increased number of subordinates under his control ensured that it didn't feel empty at all. Not only was Bai Xiaochun famous within Great Wall City, but he was now well known beyond the wall as well. Of the hundreds of tribes that occupied the eastern wildlands, all had heard of Bai Xiaochun and his horrifying aphrodisiac pill, as well as the tragic defeat the wildlands had suffered because of them. For those reasons, Bai Xiaochun's name rose high on the wildlands execution list. Before, he had been in the top 100, but now, he was in 27th place. Of the people higher than him on the list, the weakest were nascent soul cultivators. In fact, many of the people below him on the list were in that same cultivation level. Bai Xiaochun was the only core formation cultivator in the top 50. He was now famous, had a huge accumulation of battle credit, and had earned the rank of captain. Everywhere he went in Great Wall City, the cultivators who saw him would salute with clasped hands. It was a wonderful feeling that Bai Xiaochun loved, and he couldn't help but muse that staying here had been a good decision. In fact, he would often take out his copper mirror and ask all sorts of questions that drove Imposter Nightcrypt crazy. Imposter Nightcrypt would rack his brains with new ways to flatter Bai Xiaochun, until Bai Xiaochun would eventually start to get embarrassed and stop asking questions. Meanwhile, Bai Xiaochun's cultivation by no means stagnated. With all his battle credit, he was able to get plenty of medicinal pills to help with his frigid school while evolving incantation. At the same time, he continued to work on his soul convergence pill. Although his cultivation speed was actually moving along quite rapidly, whenever he thought about how much it cost to get the nascent soul pill that would propel him into the great circle of the gold core stage, he would always worry that he was going too slow. However, despite his cultivation base rising at a relatively slow rate, his undying live forever technique was making huge progress. After all, Bai Lin had been utterly shocked by Bai Xiaochun's skill in the Tao of medicine, and was more than happy to provide him with anything he asked for. He didn't even mind that some of the medicinal plants being requested were actually for personal use. As far as he was concerned, Bai Xiaochun was just too important. With so many medicinal plants at his disposal, Bai Xiaochun's speed with the undying live forever technique picked up. By this point, he had undying tendons spreading throughout his left arm. One night, his left arm even began to glow with bright light, and turned translucent to the point of being able to see his blood and veins inside. Eyes widening, he clenched his hand into a fist, which caused cracking sounds to emanate out. Then he punched out into the air, and his hand moved so quickly it was almost invisible. The sensation of incredible power which spread out from his body gave him a very clear idea of how much fleshly body strength he had at his disposal. Success! I have undying tendons in both legs as well as my left arm. Now I just need to finish my head, right arm, and torso. When that happens, I'll have completed my work with the undying tendons, and as such, the third volume of the Undying Codex. Then, all I'll have to do is break through from gold core to nascent soul. Once I'm in the nascent soul stage, I can finally cultivate undying bones. The mere thought of undying bones caused Bai Xiaochun to purse his lips in excitement. According to the descriptions in the Undying Codex, once he cultivated the undying bones, he would essentially have reached the point of having an indestructible fleshly body. Skin, flesh, tendons, bones, blood, he said softly. Undying skin is for defensive purposes. Undying flesh gives power. Undying tendons helps with speed. Undying bones provides the unifying factor for all three, allowing one to unleash incredible force. Having considered all these matters, his anticipation regarding the undying bones grew even greater. Even without undying bones, and only being half finished with my undying tendons, my fleshly body power combined with my gold core cultivation base puts me in an incredible position with my cultivation level. A flicker of pride appeared in his eyes as he thought back to his fight with the statue of Gongsun Wanner. Back then, although he had a Heaven Dao gold core, he was still only in the mid-core formation stage. During the fight, he had been unable to truly unleash what he was capable of. After all, even an ocean of water that has to pass through a tiny bottleneck will be limited. Things were different now, though. As he inched closer to the Great Circle, and had half a body's worth of undying tendons, he was completely confident that if he had to fight that Gongsun Wanner statue again, he would be able to secure victory as easy as flipping over his hand. Elder brother Zhao Tianzhao could kill nascent soul experts when in core formation. I should be able to as well. Bai Xiaochun could tell that if he truly unleashed the full power of his cultivation base, the terrifying level of power would be no weaker than what Zhao Tianzhao was capable of. From now on, not a single person beneath late core formation will be a match for me. Flicking his sleeve, he laughed loudly. Sometimes, good things come in waves. It was only 3 days after the undying tendons in his left arm were finished that, after nearly half a year of endless experimentation, he produced a batch of soul convergence pills that were exactly what he had been looking for. These soul convergence pills were no longer black, but rather, gold. They emanated an invisible aura that distorted the air around them, and in addition to that, a black hole could be seen spinning inside of them. Furthermore, if you looked at one of the pills for too long, you would almost feel like your soul was going to be tugged out of you. The moment the golden soul convergence pills appeared, he knew that they were high-grade pills. Although they still had some impurities, those impurities wouldn't cause too many problems. These were the most perfect soul convergence pills he had concocted so far. Excited, he sent a message to Bai Lin, and then took Zhao Long and his other guards up to the Great Wall. Bai Lin was there to meet him, and immediately noticed the golden medicinal pill he was holding. Soul convergence pill? He asked, looking excited. Exactly, Bai Xiaochun replied, a proud smile on his face as he held the pill in his hand and looked out beyond the wall, his eyes glittering. The battle outside the Great Wall had been going on for the better part of a year. However, because of the chaos which had played out recently, the wildlanders had been driven into a fury. At the same time, the savage tribes didn't dare to show their faces. Few savage giants could be seen on the battlefield, and those that were visible kept their distance from the wall. There were few beasts either. However, the tide of vengeful souls continued to smash into the wall and the shield. Although this form of attack wasn't particularly effective, the sheer numbers involved ensured that the shield continued to ripple and emit light. Clearly, the vengeful souls had no hope of breaking through the defenses of the Great Wall. The magical cannons were firing constantly, and the cultivators of the 5 legions attacked with surgical precision. As a result, most of the souls which got close were destroyed. A battle like this had not taken place from the moment the Great Wall came into existence until this moment. By this point, it was impossible to determine exactly how many vengeful souls had been destroyed. And yet, there were always more souls to replace them. Furthermore, because the underworld river had been tampered with, the number of souls only seemed to increase. It was in that moment that Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath and strode out to the edge of the wall, his eyes shining with anticipation. When he threw out the golden soul convergence pill, it turned into a streak of golden light that flew out into the very middle of the soul tide. When it thumped onto the ground, it didn't break apart like the previous version of the pill had. Instead, it emitted gold, rippling light in all directions. Instantly, both the cultivators on the wall and the wildlands savages could see that the golden ripples extended to fill a 3,000-meter area. Within that 3,000-meter area, all of the vengeful souls trembled, and before they could do anything, a whooshing sound filled the air as all of the souls were sucked together into one spot. The soul convergence pill became like a black hole, and in the blink of an eye, countless screams could be heard as all of the more than 10,000 souls in the area of the pill became streaks of light that were absorbed into the pill itself. However, that wasn't anything very impressive, and Bai Lin even frowned in response. The power of this soul convergence pill didn't seem to measure up to the exploding pill furnaces. However, before he could put too much thought into the matter, the golden soul convergence pill which had sucked in all the souls in the 3,000-meter area suddenly changed color. In the briefest of moments, it turned bright red. In that instant, an incredible rumbling sound echoed out as the second deadly effect of the soul convergence pill was unleashed. The pill exploded in wild fashion, sending red ripples out to cover a 30,000-meter area. As that happened, the vengeful souls that were covered by the red ripples began to shake violently, as if they were struggling against something. Then, the brutality in their eyes vanished, and their bodies vanished as quickly as a strand of smoke in a storm wind. Furthermore, in the moment of vanishing, their eyes suddenly seemed to be looking around and seeing everything clearly. Within that clarity, there seemed to be a look of relief. The battlefield once again went silent. The savage giants began to tremble as they looked over at the terrifying medicinal pill that was clearly as powerful as 10 exploding furnaces. Without even thinking about it, they began to edge away. Back on the Great Wall, everyone, Bai Lin included, gasped in the realization that this new pill was clearly as effective as 10 or more exploding furnaces. And that was just one medicinal pill. Bai Lin looked over excitedly at Bai Xiaochun and asked, "Grandmaster Bai, are you the only one who can use this pill, or can it be used by others, too?" When Bai Xiaochun concocts pills, of course they're the type that anyone can use. Even Bai Xiaochun had been a bit shocked by what had happened outside the wall. That was especially the case because of how the vengeful souls had looked relieved right before vanishing. That left Bai Xiaochun feeling very strange. Even he had been unaware that there would be another incredible use to the pills. Apparently, they could purify the souls they affected. Meanwhile, something else happened that no one else noticed. A blurry figure had appeared high up the sky, who was now looking down at the ground below. It was an old man, and although it was difficult to make out his facial features, if Bai Xiaochun had been close by, he would have recognized him immediately. He was none other than the gravekeeper. Surrounding him were what appeared to be illusory, rippling fluid, which was none other than underworld river water. He looked deeply at Bai Xiaochun, then turned away and vanished into the underworld river water. Down on the Great Wall, Bai Lin's eyes shone as brightly as the sun. "Wonderful. Can you mass-produce them?" Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times, then looked out at the battlefield and waved his hand dismissively. "Of course I can. However, as you can probably tell, I don't have enough medicinal plants or pill furnaces." Delighted, Bai Lin threw his head back and laughed uproariously. "That's no problem at all. Would 1,000 pill furnaces be enough? As for the medicinal plants, I can take you to see the liaison from the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. As long as your demands aren't too excessive, he should be able to accommodate you." Bai Xiaochun realized that Bai Lin was reminding him not to get too greedy. Chuckling, he replied, "Of course," while simultaneously trying to decide what medicinal plants he would ask for. Bai Lin took a deep breath to keep his excitement under control as he thought about what it would be like for all the soldiers in the Skin Flayers to have a soul convergence pill ready to throw out at any time. It could completely change the entire course of the war. In fact, he could even see himself as being the first general from the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect to actually lead a devastating campaign into the wildlands. The meritorious services he would perform, and the glory he would accumulate, would be talked about throughout the ages. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Bai Lin couldn't prevent his heart from racing as he looked from the battlefield back to Bai Xiaochun. "Xiaochun, according to the Diva Patriarch, this wildlands offensive is different from anything in the past. Although it might seem like they're on the run right now, the truth is that within the next few months, they will lead a charge greater than anything so far. During that battle, it is highly likely that one of their almighty Diva realm experts will join the fight. Of course, Senior Chen will handle that part of the fighting, and we wouldn't be able to do much to help. But in terms of the rest of the battle, it will be huge, and we will see an unimaginable number of savages and souls. Therefore, not only must you hurry and concoct as many soul convergence pill as possible, you should also try to come up with a way to produce a type of exploding furnace whose detonation surpasses anything you did before by multiple times. The bigger the explosion, the better." In response to Bai Lin's words, Bai Xiaochun stood there thoughtfully. The truth was that he didn't particularly want to concoct medicinal pills with the express purpose of getting the furnace to explode. After all, he was an apothecary, and apothecaries were supposed to concoct medicine, not explode furnaces. His exploding furnaces had only resulted from an unexpected turn of events during the concocting process. Back when he had first arrived in Great Wall City, he would have been too nervous to refuse, but right now, he felt a bit daring, and also determined. He was a Grand Master, right? Therefore, he glared back at Bai Lin and shook his head. "General Bai, I'm afraid you can just forget about." However, before he could finish speaking, Bai Lin's expression flickered, and at the same time, both of them heard numerous cries of alarm rising up. Some distance away from the Great Wall, more than 100 beams of light could be seen screaming through the air at incredible speed, clearly ignoring any threat to themselves. As they closed in, it was possible to see that there were over 100 giants, each one of them at least 60 meters tall. From their size, and from the incredible fluctuations rolling off of them, it was obvious that these were powerful experts from whatever tribe they came from. The cultivators on the wall instantly focused on the incoming giants. Soon, the giants began to self-detonate, causing incredible booms to ring out. However, even as that drew the attention of more cultivators on the wall, 3 beams of light appeared from a different direction, like 3 arrows ripping through the air, borrowing the force of the self-detonating giants to reach the Great Wall itself. Soon, it was clear that within these 3 beams of light were not giants, but rather, soul cultivators. There were 2 men and 1 woman, and as soon as they appeared, they unleashed a bizarre divine ability that caused a demonic green light to form together into a huge hand. In response, Bai Lin's eyes glittered, and he waved his right hand, sending out a powerful surge of energy toward the 3 soul cultivators. In that same moment, Bai Xiaochun looked over. He was separated from the 3 soul cultivators by the shield, and yet, they were staring directly at him with venomous hatred. Before Bai Lin's divine ability could get close to them, all 3 self-detonated. There had to be a good reason for 2 waves of attackers to all self-detonate. Heart-pounding, Bai Xiaochun slowly began to back up. A huge boom echoed out as the soul cultivator's self-detonation sent a huge shockwave rolling out in all directions. At the same time, an illusory figure appeared within the explosion. It was a gray specter riding a black soul horse, and it was moving with speed that far outmatched that of the soul cultivators from moments before. In the blink of an eye, it pierced through the shield and was bearing down on Bai Xiaochun. Quasi-Diva Realm Necromancer Soul. Everything happened so quickly that everyone was rooted in place in shock, with the exception of Bai Lin, who immediately leapt to intercept the enemy. However, the incoming Necromancer Soul was already resigned to being destroyed, and was holding nothing back in his attack. Stretching his right hand out, he pointed his finger at Bai Xiaochun, sending a green stream of energy out toward him. Even Bai Lin attacking with all the power he could muster only slowed down the green energy, and it was still moving so quickly that no core formation cultivator would be able to evade it. Bai Xiaochun's face drained of blood as a sensation of deadly crisis filled him. In that dangerous moment, he roared at the top of his lungs and drew upon the power of the undying tendons in both of his legs to fly backward with speed that surpassed the core formation level. After putting some distance between himself and the stream of green energy, he drew upon his frigid chi to teleport 300 meters away. Only by doing all of these things was he just barely able to extricate himself from the danger. The spot he had once occupied was pierced through by the green energy. Sadly, all of the skin flayers within several hundred meters of that spot who were hit by the fluctuations of the energy were instantly transformed into pools of blood. None of them even had a chance to scream before they were killed. With the exception of Bai Lin and Bai Xiaochun, everyone was killed instantly. As for the skin flayers beyond that radius, their faces went ashen in terror. Bai Xiaochun coughed up a mouthful of blood. His bones were all on the verge of being crushed, and even his 5 yin organs and 6 yang organs were almost destroyed. And that was just from the fluctuations rolling off of the attack itself. Looking around at the pools of blood that were all that remained of the nearby cultivators, Bai Xiaochun's heart trembled. Before he could say anything else, he coughed up another mouthful of blood. Thankfully, he had a powerful fleshly body and a gold core cultivation base. Because of that, he had avoided death. And yet, he still ended up being seriously injured. Spitting more blood out of his mouth, he looked over at the illusory necromancer, who was just now being wiped out by the gaze of the enormous eye on the tower. Even as the illusory necromancer was destroyed, a look of deep confusion could be seen in his eyes that said, "How did he survive? How did he escape death?" Originally, the necromancer had assumed that even if Bai Xiaochun managed to avoid the initial attack, being nothing more than a core formation cultivator, he would definitely be killed by the resulting fluctuations. After all, that necromancer had a quasi-diva realm cultivation base, and plus, there had been absolutely no indication that there would be an assassination attempt. In order to guarantee success, the Wildlands had sacrificed more than 100 savage giants as a distraction, as well as 3 soul cultivators. In addition to all of that, the assassin was actually the soul of a powerful necromancer. All of that had been done just to try to kill Bai Xiaochun. The mere sight of Bai Xiaochun caused all Wildlanders to seethe with hatred, and yet, they had met with nothing but defeat in their effort. Sweat was currently pouring down Bai Xiaochun's forehead. The sensation of imminent death moments ago had been incredibly intense. The 3 soul cultivators had been extremely powerful, with nascent soul cultivation bases. As for the necromancer, he was on the same level as Bai Lin, half a step into the diva realm. Because he existed as a soul body, and also had some special techniques on his side, he had been able to get through the shield to deliver a single attack. If Bai Lin hadn't been there, Bai Xiaochun wouldn't have been able to evade the attack even if he was capable of greater speed than before. Bai Lin had a very unsightly expression on his face. Bai Xiaochun had almost been killed right next to him, which was in and of itself a bald-faced provocation. Bai Xiaochun was extremely important to him. Perhaps if he had already concocted a large number of soul convergence pills, his loss could be accepted. But at the moment, he hadn't even started working. For him to die now would have been a huge blow to the cultivators of Great Wall City. In his anxiety, he rushed over to Bai Xiaochun and handed him a medicinal pill that glowed with violet light. Take this godly vestige pill. With a single whiff of the pill's medicinal aroma, Bai Xiaochun was able to identify it as a holy pill that was designed to heal injuries. Without hesitation, he popped it into his mouth, and an instant later, his entire body thrummed with spiritual power and life force. At the same time, all of his wounds and injuries began to fade away. It was a miraculous pill the likes of which Bai Xiaochun had never seen before, but he could tell that it was something incredibly valuable. In fact, Bai Lin probably kept it on hand as a life-saving contingency plan for himself. However, at the moment, Bai Xiaochun wasn't interested in getting more information about that. Turning to Bai Lin, he said, "General Bai, when you invited me to the top of the Great Wall to observe the fighting, you said over and over again that it would be safe." Bai Xiaochun was still feeling a bit jumpy and frightened, so as soon as he finished speaking, he backed a bit further away from the edge of the wall. Bai Lin felt horrible. Clasping hands apologetically to Bai Xiaochun, he then glared out at the battlefield with killing intent flickering in his eyes. Of course, Bai Xiaochun wasn't angry at Bai Lin. Were it not for Bai Lin stepping in to help, Bai Xiaochun might not even be alive at the moment. Can necromancers really just go right through the Great Wall's shield? He asked. Although Bai Xiaochun's question had been worded rather vaguely, the point was obvious: he had almost just died. He usually maintained vigilance wherever he went, but because of the spell formation shield protecting the Great Wall, had always assumed that he was safe. After a moment of silence, Bai Lin replied, "Most people can't. In fact, necromancers with physical bodies can't either. Only in soul form can they do such a thing. However, after passing through the shield, the eye on the tower will detect them, and they will be killed within 3 breaths of time. Therefore, very few necromancers would choose to do such a thing." Forcing his breathing under control, Bai Xiaochun glared out at the battlefield beyond the wall. At the moment, the savages were retreating, as was the tide of souls. "Xiaochun, please forgive my carelessness today," Bai Lin said, turning back to look at Bai Xiaochun. "Why don't you come with me to see the sect liaison? All you have to do is say the word to him, and any resources you need will be yours." Bai Xiaochun immediately understood Bai Lin's implication. Bai Lin was giving him an opportunity to stuff his pockets as a way of making up for what had happened. Therefore, he suppressed his anxiety over the events which had just occurred, cast a final hateful glare at the savages, and then followed Bai Lin away. Soon, they were back in the city, and heading to the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Sect Liaison office. Considering his status, Bai Lin didn't need to act polite. Striding up to the entrance, he barked, "Song Yiduo, get out here right now." Moments later, a fat, middle-aged man hurried out, huffing and puffing. Clasping his hands in greeting, he said, "What do you need?" "Just say the word." Bai Lin looked over at Bai Xiaochun and nodded, then stood there looking thoughtfully up into the sky. At the moment, Bai Xiaochun felt that the best way to deal with his anxiety was to crush it with cultivation resources. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to say, "I need 5,000 earth spirit tubers, and each one needs to be at least 500 years old." Song Yiduo shivered like a wild boar whose tail had just been stepped on. Yelping and fat jiggling, he replied, 500 years old? 5,000 of them? That's impossible." Ignoring him, Bai Xiaochun continued, "I also need skydragon plums, 7 seas ginsengs, wyvern scales, and god glory herbs. 10,000 each." Song Yiduo was about to respond when Bai Xiaochun cut in and added, "plus, fuel for 9-colored flame. 100 portions." Song Yidia's anger flared. "Impossible. I don't have those things on hand." "Who could?" Completely ignoring Song Yiduo, Bai Xiaochun continued, "Also, I need 10,000 bottles of spirit alcohol designed to replenish the cultivation base. And 100 nascent soul pills. Oh right, that, what's it called? Godly vestige pill. I want 100 of them too." By this point, even Bai Lin was getting a bit nervous. From what he could tell, it would probably require sending a message to his grandfather to acquire such a collection. As for Song Yiduo, he was wailing inwardly with grief. He was in charge of all the day-to-day affairs in Great Wall City, and if expenditures got too high, he would be punished. Conversely, if he didn't spend enough to keep the 5 legions happy, they would get angry. Bai Xiaochun waved his hand dismissively and looked over at Bai Lin. After a moment of thought, Bai Lin gave Song Yiduo a wry smile and then dragged him off to the side. First, he started out whispering, but then got angry, and finally, smashed his fist into a nearby ornamental rock, scaring the daylights out of Song Yiduo. Then the two of them walked back to Bai Xiaochun. With a wry smile, Bai Lin hustled Bai Xiaochun away, worried that he would start making more demands. He couldn't get you the 9-colored flame fuel or the godly vestige pills even if you killed him. Everything else, he can handle. As for the nascent soul pill, I need to think about how to pull that off. Bai Xiaochun had been mentally reviewing all of the wonderful things he knew about to try to figure out more things to request, but before he could, he found himself being dragged away by Bai Lin. Even still, Bai Xiaochun was chuckling inwardly. He had demanded an exorbitant compensation moments ago, and would have been happy if only part of his requests had been fulfilled. Feeling very pleased with himself, he looked over at Bai Lin, the deadly crisis he had just endured still fresh in mind. General, didn't you just ask me if there was a way to make the pill furnace explosions even more powerful? What? Bai Lin replied, his pupils constricted. Didn't you say that was impossible? Bai Xiaochun's eyes widened into a glare. Impossible? What do you mean impossible? Of course it's possible. Or at least, it could be. Gritting his teeth, he continued, all you want is a bigger explosion, right? It's simple. Some time back, I actually caused a pill furnace explosion so big it almost leveled an immortal mountain. All the plants and vegetation were incinerated, and everything else was burned to a crisp. As soon as Bai Lin heard this, his eyes began to shine brightly. He was completely obsessed with the exploding pill furnaces, and as such, he quickly asked, what do you need? Just say the word. The specific medicinal pill formula is one aspect. But more important is the actual furnace involved. I need the same type of pill furnace they had back in the bloodstream sect. I'm not really sure how to explain it. Why don't you have the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect send some people to the River Defying sect, and look for the Grand Elder of Lesser Marsh Peak in the bloodstream division? He can explain the details. Just have the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect make some similar pill furnaces based on his specifications. Pill furnaces like that are especially strong, so the explosions they make are incredibly large. Just don't forget that I'm from the River Defying sect, General Bai, so please make sure the representatives from the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect are a bit more polite than usual. No problem at all, Bai Lin said enthusiastically. Laughing, he told Bai Xiaochun to go back to the armory on his own, while he went back to discuss things with Song Yiduo. Bai Xiaochun made his way back to the armory, his mood much better than before. By now, he had recovered from the sensation of deadly crisis. However, he couldn't forget the ordeal he had just gone through, nor the icy killing intent he had seen in the eyes of the necromancer who had attacked him. I can't believe that the wildlanders were willing to sacrifice over 100 savage giants, 3 soul cultivators, and a necromancer, all to try to kill me. As of that moment, he made the decision to never go up onto the Great Wall itself unless it was absolutely necessary. After all, once his new exploding furnace made its debut, and he started pumping out soul convergence pills, the wildlanders would hate him more than ever. Before long, his head would definitely fetch an astronomical price in the wildlands. That thought left his heart stirring with fear and fury both. I never wanted any of this, he thought with a sigh. But I guess there's nothing I can do about it. We're just on different sides, that's all. Then he thought about the fact that he would be leaving in 10 years, and breathed a sigh of relief. Might as well not worry about it. In 10 years, I'll be gone anyway. For now, I need to focus on battle credit, and even more importantly, getting myself into the great circle of the gold core stage. I also need to cultivate my undying live forever technique to completion. Once I do all that, I'll be in a much better position. After returning to the armory, he went into secluded meditation and began to work on his cultivation. 7 days sped by in a blur. Bai Xiaochun himself had no idea how Bai Lin and Song Yiduo managed it all, but on the 8th day, the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect's teleportation portal was activated, and a whole batch of supplies was sent to Great Wall City. That afternoon, Bai Lin came personally to Bai Xiaochun's residence, and with the wave of his hand, sent 1,000 pill furnaces rumbling down out of the sky. There were also numerous bags of holding, plus something completely new. There were 10 shocking pill furnaces, each of which was fully 300 meters tall. When they descended from the sky and landed onto the ground, everything in the area shook violently. Dust blew out in all directions as incredible pressure weighed down. Zhao Long and all of the other soldiers under Bai Xiaochun's command looked at the pill furnaces with complete shock. Those Those are pill furnaces? Heavens! I've never seen a pill furnace that big before. There's no way those are pill furnaces. Those are some kind of powerful magical treasure. Look at what they're made from. That's the same stuff they make nascent soul-level battleships from. Deep-sea meteoric iron. Even as their cries rang out, Bai Xiaochun emerged from his meditative trance and walked out of his room. When he saw the pill furnaces out in the courtyard, he gasped just as loudly as everyone else. Well, what do you think? Bai Lin said, laughing triumphantly. In order to procure all of these items, Bai Lin had been forced to beg for help from his grandfather, and had used every other method at his disposal. Furthermore, to produce these 10 enormous pill furnaces, all of the power of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect had been mobilized, and they had even called upon help from other parts of the Eastern cultivation world. The river-defying sect had been completely shaken when an emissary from the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect arrived and respectfully asked many questions of them. At the same time, they got some news about Bai Xiaochun, leaving the entire river-defying sect very excited. Those are all of the medicinal plants you requested, Bai Lin continued, pointing at all of the bags of holding. By the way, this is about the limit of my abilities to procure resources. Feeling profoundly pleased, Bai Xiaochun rushed over to examine the bags of holding, his heart beating more rapidly with every moment. Within moments, his face was flushed with excitement. Although there were no nascent soul pills or 9-colored flame fuel, there were 10 godly vestige pills, as well as all of the medicinal plants he had requested. Although there wasn't a mind-bogglingly large number of them, everything he had asked for was present. Most importantly, the earth spirit tubers and other ingredients that could increase life force were all present in large numbers. Eyebrows raised in delight, Bai Xiaochun nodded repeatedly as he inspected the bags. Next, he walked over to inspect the pill furnaces, including the 1,000 ordinary furnaces, and also the 10 300-meter-tall ones. After examining the huge pill furnaces, Bai Xiaochun was delighted to find that in terms of quality, they actually exceeded the pill furnace he'd used on Lesser Marsh Peak. Furthermore, they could also be sealed even tighter. The surfaces were covered with spell formations for just that purpose. Xiaochun, most of the things you requested are here. For the items that aren't, give me some time to try to think of a way to get them. Right now, the most important thing to consider is that the biggest battle yet to be fought will be coming in the next few months. Therefore, time is of the essence. You need to start producing soul convergence pills as quickly as possible, and also work on those 10 destructive furnaces. With a final deep look at Bai Xiaochun, Bai Lin turned and left. Bai Xiaochun rubbed his hands together, eyes shining as he circled around the 10 huge pill furnaces a few more times. Finally, he threw his back and laughed. Zhao Long, Lu Li, you and the rest of the battalion are going to help me make some unheard of super pills, the likes of which have never been seen before. The 100 members of the battalion all voiced their agreement, whereupon the 10 huge furnaces were set up in the middle of the courtyard, surrounded by the 1,000 ordinary furnaces in concentric rings. Unfortunately, there were simply too many furnaces, so Bai Xiaochun waved his hand, issuing orders to his men to expand his residence. After tearing down and absorbing more of the nearby empty residences, he had a new courtyard that was fully 30,000 meters across, giving them more than enough space. The first furnaces he started to work with were the huge ones. Bai Xiaochun knew that they were extraordinary, and therefore, used 10 times as many earth flame stones as usual. In fact, he even went to the length of putting some of the stones inside the pill furnaces themselves. He also added numerous medicinal plants that would cause violent explosions when they got hot enough. For each type of plant, he was liberal with his usage, adding in hundreds of portions. All I want is an explosion, right? For concocting other types of medicines, I need to put a lot of thought into the formula, but for exploding furnaces, it's simple. Brimming with self-confidence, he walked among the 10 huge pill furnaces, adding medicinal plants in here and there, and even adding in some low-quality soul convergence pills he had concocted in the past. He also added some of the other medicinal pills he had in his bag of holding that he didn't plan to use in the future. After a bit of thought, he also went so far as to add quite a few types of poison medicine. Still worried that the explosions wouldn't be powerful enough, he gritted his teeth and added in many of the mystery pills he had concocted in the past, pills that he would never dare to consume. In the end, he had no idea exactly what type of bizarre medicinal pills would form within the furnaces, but the entire point was to make the ingredients inside of the furnaces unstable to the point where they would explode. Finally, he patted his hands in satisfaction. That should do it, he said, looking contentedly at the 10 huge furnaces. By now, he very much looked forward to seeing what they would do when they finally exploded. Having accomplished these things, he rested a bit before beginning to work with the 1000 ordinary pill furnaces. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.